The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello all. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ioanna Labropoulou and I work as a front-end developer for C. C is one of the biggest IT companies in the shipping sector that created the world's first end-to-end digital shipping platform. In C, we build innovative web and mobile apps and use the latest technologies to ensure our products meet our users' expectations. So today, we're going to speak about React Native, one of the trendiest frameworks to build mobile apps. But let's start from the very beginning. In 1973, Motorola presented to the public the first commercial phone, named Motorola Dynatac 8000X. In this slide, we can see a well-dressed man being so excited to use a device that cost around 4 grand, weighed more than a kilo, and being 23 centimeters tall. Funny, huh? Well, it might not have been the most ergonomic apparatus, but back in the 80s, it was a breakthrough that people could speak for 30 minutes by using a wireless phone that could store up to 30 phone numbers. From that moment, many companies tried to increase market share, but it wasn't until 2007 when Apple changed the face of the mobile space by introducing the iPhone. It was the first smartphone with lots of applications, multi-touch user interface, and an advanced software. Since then, as we all know, mobile phones gained more and more popularity, the software technology has made huge steps, and this is the most opportune time for us as engineers to satisfy our users' needs. So today, we will talk about what React Native is, why to use it, how to get started, and its main concepts that help us create awesome apps. Then, we will have some fun time, coding time, followed by a live demo. At the end, we will summarize the takeaways of React Native and share thoughts with the audience. At this point, I'd like to inform you that there is a chat box on the platform where you can type in your questions during the presentation. Please, feel free to use it. React Native. React Native is a framework built by Facebook for creating Android and iOS mobile apps. On Facebook, they have a motto, which is learn once, use it everywhere. If you take a close look to React Native syntax and principles, you will notice that it is quite similar to React. And if you know React, you can write React Native. In other words, if you're a web developer, you can be a mobile developer and vice versa. Let's see more about React Native. React Native is a framework for creating hybrid mobile apps. This means that you only need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build cross-platform mobile applications. That kind of logic is opposite to building a native app where you must code in specific language and use specific development tools like Xcode or Android. This is a huge advantage of React Native, because you have only one code base for both your Android and iOS app. As a result, the development process is faster, and fail fast is even faster. Some more pros about React Native is that it is free, it is open source, with a great documentation, and with a large community. So problems with the framework are fixed fast, and when you get stuck, you won't feel alone banging your head on the wall to find a solution. Last, and probably the most important advantage, is the performance. Mobile apps written in React Native are faster compared to other hybrid solutions, and in some cases, it almost feels like the app was built with native code. Of course, I won't lie. There are a few drawbacks, but let's admit it. No framework is perfect. The main disadvantages are the size of your app, that it will be a little bit bigger but it won't be that big to make people avoid from download it. Last, you might need to write native code. For example, if you want to include heavy animations or you want to interact with a feature of the device and the corresponding API is not supported. But I would say that these cases are quite rare unless we're talking about creating a game with 3D graphics. Let's get started. If you're coming from a web background, as I do, the easiest way to get started with React Native is with Expo tools, because they allow you to start a project without installing and configuring Xcode or Android. I assume that most of you have a previous web development experience and are quite confident to use the console and NPM packages. So, the first step you need to do is to type into your console npm install -g expo CLI or yarn global add expo CLI if you're using yarn. Once you do that, you're ready to initiate your first mobile project by writing in the console expo init and the name of your project. To run the app now, to your phone, all you need to do is to download the Expo Client app from Google Play if you have an Android phone, or from Apple Store in case you own an iPhone. And now we are ready to write our first app. In this slide, you can see how to code the well-known Hello World app in React Native, and you probably recognize that some components are existent. For the current being, it's not our purpose to explain every single line of code. What I really want to show you is how easy it is to see your app run on your device. To do so, we need to type in the console npm start or yarn start if you use yarn. Once the command is executed, you will see in the console a QR code similar to the one displayed in the slide. All you need to do is to use your phone to scan the QR code by using the Expo client. The project will be built into your phone, and once this is done, you will see the result. A screen that displays at the center the text, Hello World. Easy, right? To be honest, the first time I interacted with the Expo tools, I was so impressed. I almost loved it. And I highly recommend it to all the developers who start with React Native. Unfortunately, it has some limitations that you need to be aware of. Some of those are big enough to become blockers in your project. First of all, not all iOS and Android APIs are available. So if you want to interact with Bluetooth or WebRTC, no, you won't be able to do it with Expo tools. If you want to make money by adding in-app purchases, Expo tools won't help you. Moreover, the SDK doesn't support any types of background code executions. The app size is a bit bigger than the one if you created a React Native app with a traditional way of installation. We will speak about it in a bit. And last, Expo tools don't support most of the push notification services, and the minimum supported operating system versions are Android 5 Plus and iOS 10 Plus. If you find that Expo tools has too many limitations for your project, then you can go with a traditional React Native installation. We are referring to the React Native CLI. In this case, you must download development tools like Android or Xcode, but you will be able to run your app in many emulators, and thus you can easily identify responsiveness problems. To get started with React Native CLI, you need to install it by using the command npm install -g React Native CLI or yarn global add React Native CLI if you use yarn. Also, you need to install Java and the development tools based on the operating system of your PC. If you have Linux or Windows, you must install the Android Studio. If you own a Mac, you should install Xcode. A React Native project is initiated by running the command React Native init and the name of your project. Last, to run your app into a preferred emulator, you can run the command React Native run Android for Android or React Native run iOS for iOS. Now that we know how to set up a React Native project, let's write some code. As a web developer, I mainly write React. So my question before starting with React Native was how easy it is for a web developer to make the transition. And surprisingly, it is so easy. React Native provides a list of components similar to HTML. In this slide, I tried to gather the most commonly used HTML tags and show you the equivalent React Native component you can use instead to get a similar result. When we want to define the container with HTML, depending on the business logic the container includes, we use one of the following tags: div, span, section, or article. In React Native, there is only one component exposed to define a container, and this is the view component. In HTML, any text can be wrapped in one of the aforementioned tags. This is not feasible with React Native. When you want to add a text, you must wrap it inside a text component. Instead of the input tag, we need to use the text input. For buttons now, we have various options, either the button component or the touchables components that provide the capability to capture tapping gestures and display feedback when a gesture is recognized. For lists, based on your needs, you can either use the scroll view, the flat list, or the section list. And for images, you can use the image component. At this point, we need to say that before using a React Native component, have a look at the documentation. The reason is because there are some differences between the attributes a tag supports and the props the React Native component gets. For instance, the button component gets the on-press props and not the on-click as you'd probably expected. Similarly, the image gets the props source and not src. Now, other main concepts that you will likely need to write code for are navigation, styling, and state management. React Native recommends to use React Native navigation for handling the navigation of your app. I would suggest to use the React Native package instead. This is a cool NPM package, and with some few lines of code, you can manage the navigation really easily. Also, the package by default displays an arrow back button on the top left of your screens when needed, and ensures that the back button in Android devices also works. As far as the style is concerned, React Native provides the style sheet API. The style names and values usually match how CSS works on the web, except from the fact that the names are written using camel casing. For example, you must write font size, and the S should be capital rather than font -size. For those who don't want to change the way you write CSS, I would suggest to use one of the most popular NPM packages for styling, named Style Components. Last, the concepts for the state management remain exactly the same with React. This means that the life cycle of components, props, hooks, context API, and many more work like the same as in React. Now, at the end of the day, Android and iPhones have their own unique features. To handle these cases, Facebook provides platform components and APIs to interact with those unique features. An example I can give you is the following. In case you would like to display a kind of alert in your device, if you have an iPhone, you should use the alert iOS component. But if you have an Android, you have to use the Toast Android component instead. Last, React Native also provides a list of components that are really handy and commonly used, such as modal for showing pop-ups and animated for adding animations. A full list of React Native's APIs can be found in documentation. Coding time. I believe that when you want to learn how to use a new framework, the first thing to do is to read its documentation and probably find some tutorials. But the only way to make yourself feel more comfortable with that new framework is to find an app that you want to create and then just do it. So for me, the journey began like that. The last few months, I meet more and more people who like yoga. So for this webinar, I came up with the idea to build a small app that displays a playlist of yoga songs. For this app, my main concern was that I have never written code before that handles sounds. So I decided to create a proof of concept. All I wanted was to display a button. When I clicked on the button, a song would start playing. When I clicked the button again, the song would stop. I made my research and I found out that I could either use the audio API provided by the Expo tools or to find a popular NPM package to do my job. As I have mentioned before, the Expo tools do not support any types of background APIs, which means that the moment my app went to the background, any plain song would stop. And I didn't want this to happen, of course. So I tried for my proof of concept a couple of NPM packages and decided to use the React Native sounds. Let's see some code now. So for my list of songs, I had to use the flat list component, as you can see. The flat list component gets two mandatory props. A, the data, which gives all the data for our songs, and B, it gets a render item props, which is a function that returns a JSX element to render the user interface of a single song. And for my song, I wanted to display user interface similar like this. It is actually a card that has the title of the song at the top, and for the content, I want to render an icon, a small description, and two buttons, one to start the song and one to pause it. Let's now take a look at the code. So the whole code is wrapped in a component named song, which is this one. You can imagine that the song is a view component that has extra CSS, and this is a style component. The title component, which is here, is a text component that has extra CSS to render a red background and a white text. For the content, we have an icon that displays our icon. We have a text that displays our description. And last, we have two touchable opacities, which we will use, which will make our components clickable, and that includes our images. As you can see, when the user presses the play button, the function onPressPlay button will be called. And when the user presses the pause button, which is here, the onPressButton pause function will be called. And this is the look and feel of our app with the code we have written so far. The next thing I wanted to do was, of course, to disable all the play buttons when a song was being played. How would do that? by using state management, of course. The first addition we need to make is to add the prop disabled on the play button, which is here. The button will be disabled in case there is a plain song key existent. We have to use the useState API to initialize the plain song key. Initially, its value should be null, and in this case, all the play buttons are expected to be enabled. When the user presses the play button, as we said, the onPress play button function will be called. This function will play our song and also will update the plain song key. And once this is done, we expect to force the buttons to become disabled. But no, that won't work. I had to search on the Stack Overflow to see what the problem was. And what I found was that a flat list that gets only two properties, two props, the data and the render items, behaves as a presentational component. To force a flat list to re-render itself once the state changes, you need to pass an extra prop called extra data, like that. Apparently, I was so eager to start writing the code, and I didn't pay that much attention to the documentation. So, before using a component, I would suggest to do at least a cross-reading of the props a component gets. You never know when you will need to add more than the mandatory ones. I was really happy. I had my first working version of the yoga app, and before adding more functionality, I decided to ask from some friends of mine to give me an honest feedback. The components I received were like, the user interface is too complex, I see too many buttons, I don't like it, I don't know where to focus, and I was like that. So I decided to take a step back and think more about the design. I took a paper and a pencil and I drew some mock-ups similar to the wireframes displayed in this slide. So I decided to make my list more simpler. For each song, I will only display the title, the icon, and only the description. Once the user clicks on a song, then a new screen, which is a screen 2, will be displayed that includes more like the similar information, but also a play button. If the user clicks the play button, then the song will start playing, and the user will be provided with two options: A, to pause the song, or to stop it. As you might realize, the new user interface added one more coding feature, which is the navigation. And it's time for our live demo. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to bring in the screen the code and the emulator. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is our emulator. And here is our VS Code that includes all our code of our demo at the moment. Our app starts from the app.js file, which is this one. I need to make it a little bit bigger. Control plus. Also, we don't need this. Perfect. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I think this is fine. Hope you can see. Okay. And our app.js has two screens that we defined, the home screen and the view song screen. Our mobile app will start from the home screen because in this object, the first property is the home. If it was the other way around, this means that would make our app start from the view song. Our home screen will display this list that you see, the list of our songs, and our view song screen will display only one song and the user can interact with that song. Let's see the code of the home screen. This is located in the home.js file, which is here. The home.js file renders a playlist component. The playlist component gets two props, the songs, that are actually the data for the songs, and a navigation prop, which is important for our navigation to work properly. To load our song, this is done in our useEffect function. Because I didn't really want to spend time on building my own backend, I used a tool called GraphQL API. What it does is the following. You can have a Google spreadsheet, and this can act as your database. GraphQL API gets this database and generates all the GraphQL APIs that you might need. And you can call that and you can retrieve your data, or you can update your data. So once I load my data, my playlist will re-render, and that would actually display the list. So let's see what playlist has inside. I hit F12. Here it is. Here is my list. Is really similar to the code I showed you before in the slides, with the only difference that the whole container is wrapped in a touchable opacity. And once the user clicks on that item, the viewSong function will be called. The viewSong function is defined here. Once this is called, what we see is that it will navigate us to another screen, which is called viewSong. And let's see the viewSong. Here is our viewSong function. Here in our viewSong, we have the title, we have the image and description as we would expect. And last, we have many action buttons that are actually our buttons that will display the play button, the resume button, the pause button, and the stop button. This is our app. Let's see this working in our emulator. This is it. You can see the list. You can scroll. You can click on a song. Here you can see the back button, which has been added by the NPM package for navigation. If I click back, then I see again my list. Let's click here. And if I click play, a song would start playing. This is our song. If I pause it, then the song is paused. If I resume it, then it continues from where it stopped. And if I click stop, it stops. So this is our app. I would like to say at this point that I really like React Native because it provides, Facebook have provided really good tools for developing React Native. Here in the emulator, if you click Control and M, you'll see this pop-up. For Xcode and iOS, you'll see this pop-up if you click Command and M. In this pop-up, you can see a lot of options that you have, but for me, the most important are the first three options. Let's see them. The first option is a reload. So if I click it, it should reload the app. Yes, you see that it has reloaded the app, and our app starts from the home.js as expected. Control M. The second option is for debugging reason. If you enable this option, you'll be able to debug your app, and you'll see a tool similar to the Chrome DevTools that I suppose that most of you already have used it. The third option, which is really important, if it is enabled, it helps you a lot because when you do any changes to your code and you save those changes, the emulator grasps those changes and automatically updates your app and reloads it. At the moment, I have this option already enabled. So what I'm going to try to do is that I'll try to make a change and I will save it. And hopefully, the app will be reloaded with the change. Let's, for example, change the background of this card. I mean, the background here of the title. And instead of red, let's make it green. Our code is located in the playlist.js file, as far as I remember. Playlist.js, perfect. So I would find it. I need to find, this is my title. And the background, I changed it from red to green. And I hit save. And let's see, and boom, our background is green. Perfect. So that was our live demo, and we will return back now to the presentation for our summary. Oops, sorry for this. Okay, sorry, let's find it. Here it is, takeaways. React Native is a powerful framework to build mobile apps, as we've said. Almost any kind of mobile app you want to implement can be done with React Native, except probably games with heavy animations and 3D graphics. If you want to build a game like that, there are other options available like Unity and Unreal Engine. Moreover, a mobile app built with React Native has high performance, which is really important to the user experience. Last, you won't need to learn a new language from scratch. If you're a web developer, you can easily become a mobile developer. All in all, React Native can help you release a mobile app with a minimum effort. That was it. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed. Before starting the Q&A session, I'd like to say a few more things to keep in mind. Firstly, you can find the code in the GitHub link displayed on this slide. Also, I'd like to invite you to the next meetup that will be held here at C premises on the 24th of September, where we will be discussing the movement from unconscious bias to conscious inclusivity within tech. More info can be found on the link provided at the bottom of this slide. And lastly, we are hiring. So if you want to work with us, please contact us. And now let's see the chat box. And let's see if we have questions. Okay, we have one question. The question is whether NFC is available. To be frank, I haven't really tried to work with NFC. I need to have a look and let you know. I think that NFC is really hot at the moment, and probably this can be done, but I need to have a look on that. I'll come back with this information. And I think this is the only question we have. Okay, now we have more questions. What about accessibility with React Native? Oh, nice question. With accessibility, well, the thing is that React Native in general tries to simplify a lot the code that we use. So for accessibility, it only provides two ways to provide accessibility. This is the accessibility label and the accessibility hint. So if you use one of those props, then your app will be accessible. And this is really nice because, let's say, if you want to build a web app for accessibility, it provides more tags, like more array tags, sorry. And I think that I like it more that we don't need to use so many different arrays for doing all the accessibility. And as far as I know, the moment you add one of these accessibility props, what it does is that you can have your app, and then the accessibility devices can read all the different labels one by one, starting from the top of your screen to the end of your screen. Any more questions? Oh, if I think that React Native might eventually replace native languages such as Swift. Interesting question. Well, I think that it will take much time to do that. The main reason is that I believe that, yes, we can do many things with React Native, but we cannot do all things, and some are quite important. Let's give you an example, for example. Let's say that we want to have an app and we want to store sensitive data. At the moment, we cannot do that with the way React Native provide to us. We need to write native code to do that, which means that React Native needs to implement all the APIs to the device in order to make React Native to be as powerful as a native code. It has to do with the fact how, let's say, Facebook would like to work. And I don't know if they want to work a lot and provide all the APIs needed for the native code. Eventually, this can happen. But at the moment, unfortunately, there are cases that you need to write native code. I think at the moment the React testing library is really good for that. Unfortunately, I haven't used many more apart from that. And I need to have a closer look on the automated testing about that, about React Native. And I'm actually, and I am answering to the, sorry for this, I'm answering to the question about the automated testing. Okay, more questions. When creating APK files, is it something easy to do, or do you have to debug for a long time? Well, I did that like a year ago, in where the documentation wasn't supposed to be really good, but I managed to do that really easily. So no worries about that. And what I've noticed is that the last year, the documentation has become so good, and when you get stuck, you can find many people responding to Stack Overflow. So don't worry about that. It is really easy to be done. More questions? Okay, the question is that, is the React Native code run correctly on both platforms? Have you found cases that you need to write platform-specific code? Okay, these are two questions. Let's start the answer from the first one. The question is that, is the React Native code run correctly on both platforms? I would say that most of the code that you write, yes, it can run correctly on both platforms. But to do so, you need to write code that they're not platform specific. But there are cases, for example, that you want to create an app that looks really similar to a native app. So to do so, you need to write native code. So if you go to that solution, you need to be really specific. To do so, for example, if you want to show a calendar, let's say, or if you want to show an alert, as we said in the presentation, if you have an iPhone, probably you need to write code for an iPhone, and you need to actually use the calendar iOS. So yes, in that case, your code is different. At the moment, I would like to say that Facebook provides two tools to work with native components. The first one is that you can have a file that, for example, you can name it like, I don't know, let's say calendar, and you can, for iOS, you can name it calendar-ios.js, and for your Android, you can name it calendar-android.js. React Native is so smart to understand that if I actually run my app, in iOS, then it will go and pick the calendar iOS file to display into the iOS phone. And if the app runs on Android, it will pick up the file calendar android.js file. And the second question was if I ever found cases that I had to write platform-specific code. In my case, specifically for me, I haven't found these cases, but I think that had to do with the apps I wanted to build. But yes, I know cases that you need to write native code. Some case, for example, might be if you want to have a really heavy animation, then probably the animated API might not work that smoothly, and you might need to write code for the animations. And another case scenario is that if you want to store sensitive data, probably you need to write the native code and store your data on the persistent storage. Another question, what do you mean we need to write native code? Do we have to write it in both the platforms Android and iOS? It depends on the feature that you want to build. For example, if you want and yes, sorry for this. Actually, yes, you need to write different code for Android and different code for iOS because it is native. So for that feature, you need to write iOS and Android native code. Do we have any questions more? Okay, I think that this was our last question. Thank you for joining us. It was a great enjoy speaking today, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. In the following days, we will be sharing the recording, and actually this will be done after our session. And also, please feel free to connect via LinkedIn in order to continue any conversation. I know that we have at least 2 questions that I need to have a look on. The one I remember that was about NFC. Please connect via LinkedIn and we can continue the conversation there. Also, we will be running more sessions about React Native and other topics. Thank you a lot.